If you're ever having a bad day, just listen to what this girl went through and I'm sure you'll change your mind. Because not only was she hitchhiking and picked up by this psycho who brutally SA'd her, but he also cut off both of her arms with a hatchet and then threw her off of a 30-foot cliff. He left her for dead, but somehow she did not die. She climbed all the way back up that cliff, shoving mud into her raw arms to stop the bleeding and muscles from falling out. And then she walked for 3 miles before someone saw her and took her to the hospital. It's insane that she lived through this, but the man who did this to her, yeah, he only served 8 years in prison, and then he was released and ended up murdering another woman. This is the disturbing survival story of Mary Vincent. It's one that I think everyone should know, so let's talk about it. This is Mary Vincent. She was only 15 years old when her life drastically changed. She lived with her family in Las Vegas, but in 1978, her family started to kind of fall apart. Her mom and dad were going through a divorce and she had 6 other siblings, so Mary was sometimes able to sneak away without anyone realizing. Things weren't the best at home, so for a while there she lived on the streets and would often sleep over with some friends. But in September of 1978, Mary decided that she'd had enough of Las Vegas and wanted to go live with her grandpa in Berkeley, California instead. So she began hitchhiking all the way there, and for the most part everything was going well. She got all the way to Modesto before needing to find another ride to Berkeley, so she started flagging down everyone who drove by. No one was wanting to stop though. That is until a blue van pulled up next to her. Inside was 51-year-old Lawrence Singleton, and although Mary was hesitant to get in with him, overall he seemed like a nice old man, so she got in anyway. It wasn't until Lawrence went the very obvious wrong way and turned off onto a remote, deserted road that Mary started to get really scared. Before she could get out and escape though, Lawrence struck her over the head with a sledgehammer, knocking her unconscious. He then very tightly tied Mary up, and for the next several hours, he violently SA'd her multiple times. And this assault went on for so long that it carried on till the morning. She begged to be let go, and then out of the blue, it was like something inside of him snapped. He looked at her with a blank face and said, quote, "You want to be set free? I'll set you free." End quote. At first, Mary had a tiny bit of hope that he would just untie her and let her go freely, but she never could have imagined the disturbing things that he was actually about to do. This is when Lawrence pulled out a hatchet and cut off both of her arms at the forearm while she was fully conscious. He then took Mary as she was still alive and threw her off of a 30-foot cliff, leaving her for dead. Then he just drove away as if he didn't just violently chop someone's arms off. By all accounts, this very well could have killed Mary since she was already losing a lot of blood. But somehow, again, she survived the fall. When she came to at the bottom of the cliff, she said that even though she was in severe pain, she heard this loud, persistent voice in her head. It was telling her that she couldn't go to sleep because if she did, this evil man was going to do this to someone else, and she couldn't let that happen. So she sat up, completely naked, and started to shove mud into the raw ends of her arms to stop all of the bleeding. She then managed to climb all the way up the 30-foot cliff, all while holding her amputated arms straight up so that the muscles wouldn't fall out. When she got to the top, she was barely conscious, but she started walking down the highway, nude and bloody for 3 miles until a couple who were driving by saw her and took her to the hospital. I can't imagine living through something as horrifically painful as this, but Mary was so strong, and her strength didn't stop there. Once in the hospital, Mary refused to sleep or get any rest until she was able to tell the police the exact description of the man who did this to her. From that, they were able to put together a composite sketch of the suspect, and not long after, Lawrence was found and arrested. It didn't really take long at the trial for him to be found guilty of attempted murder, kidnapping, and multiple SA charges. When asked to identify him in court, Mary pointed at Lawrence with her prosthetic hook hand, which is an image that kind of went viral in this case. Mary ended up winning a civil judgment against Lawrence at the trial and was awarded $2.5 million. But sadly, she never received her payment because he was unemployed and had no money to give her. And what's really creepy is that as Mary walked by Lawrence at the trial, and mind you, this was in a courtroom full of people and authorities, he looked at her and told her that he promised to finish her off once he was released from jail. Even though Lawrence was found guilty of attempted murder, he was sentenced to only 14 years in prison. But what's crazy is that he was released after only serving 8 years. At the time, 14 years years was the maximum allowed under California law. And honestly, that's a really short time for trying to kill someone. So the fact that he was released after only serving 8 is insane. He was released in 1987, and this caused major outrage in California. Literally all of California protested against this, and he was actually forced to live in a trailer on the San Quentin prison grounds until his parole ended, because not one single town in the state of California would accept him, which I'm kind of sad that they allowed him to live on prison grounds because that's inherently protecting him, which he did not deserve. After his parole ended though, Lawrence went on to move to Florida, and this was a really tough time for Mary. I mean, she was absolutely terrified of him. Who wouldn't be? He cut off her arms and then promised to finish her off once he was let out of jail. Mary was so scared during this time that she actually hired a bodyguard to protect her, but this did not stop the nightmares. She said they were horrible, but as the years went on, she started to heal and not have them anymore. This would not last for long though, because in 1997, Lawrence would strike again. On February 19th, 1997, Lawrence, who was now 71 years old, killed Roxanne Hayes in Florida. Roxanne was a mom of 3, and that day Lawrence stabbed her 7 times until she died. According to him, they'd been arguing over a knife, and as they were doing so, she was stabbed 7 times. He said he didn't know this though because she was silent as she was being stabbed. He didn't realize that she'd actually been stabbed until she laid down on the couch and bled out. He said he tried to call 911, but he picked up a TV remote instead, and then he tried walking her to the door, but she'd already died. None of this was true though, and he was lying about the entire thing, because Roxanne had been brutally stabbed 7 times in the face, chest, and stomach. At the trial for this in 1998, Mary actually came back and testified against him once again. She literally did everything she could to make sure that he would never hurt another woman ever again, which is absolutely courageous. I mean, can you imagine going through what she did and then having to come back and face your attacker decades later? Lawrence was found guilty, and this time he was sentenced to death. Sadly though, Lawrence died in 2001 from cancer while on death row, so literally just 3 years later. In my opinion, that's not justice. He got to live his entire life out, hurting woman after woman with no accountability. Mary said that her nightmares from her attack had finally stopped right before Roxanne was killed, and then after that happened, they came back. She said she would have recurring nightmares starting off with her own attack. She said that she could feel everything in these dreams, and then she would see so many other women, and worse things would happen to them. Despite what he did to her, Mary went on to heal and tell her story. She went on to become a motivational speaker and became a victim's advocate. She was a huge advocate for sentencing reform, and because of her, California later passed a law increasing the maximum penalty for crimes like Lawrence's. This was later named the Singleton Bill after Lawrence, and that honestly kind of makes me mad that it was named after him. I feel like, if anything, it should have been named after Mary. Now Mary is a really talented artist, and she went on to get married and have 2 kids. She's also super smart and likes to use spare parts from broken down electronics to modify her prosthetic arms, and she turns them into custom designs. Like, that is just so cool. All I know is that Mary is one of the strongest people to ever exist. It's just sad that the system failed her and Roxanne. Her murder 100% could have been prevented, and this evil man should have never been released after what he did to Mary.